Welcome to another Mythic dungeon full guide from a healer's perspective. Today we'll be featuring Necrotic Wake, which is heralded as the hardest dungeon yet in Shadowlands by some players. In my opinion, nothing beats Plague Fodder. As soon as the dungeon starts, you need to clear out a lot of trash before engaging the first boss. One special mechanic you must be aware of is Clinging Darkness. It is an escalating dot which will be transferred to another player for the remaining of its duration if dispelled. If you are the tank, this is what you must do. After you finish clearing the current mob, wait for the healer to deal with Clinging Darkness and do not go for the next pull unless you are certain he or she is very capable of dealing with it. If you are the healer, you can dispel it after some stacks are gained, and keep healing and dispelling on whoever it goes to. This will come as a personal taste, but I find this method risky, especially if the tank keeps pulling. Not only you will not have control on who Clinging Darkness is going to, but you will have to keep healing and dispelling. And by doing so, you will waste some of your healing rotation by adding cleanse to it. What I personally do is dispel until the debuff is on me and use heavy single target healing on myself. Once the dot has gained many stacks, I will pop some damage mitigation ability with low cooldown, such as the Paladin's Divine Protection, and keep the debuff with me for the entire of its duration, as I can still heal others through my beacon. Nevertheless, this can be a recipe for disaster in very high Mythic plus dungeon depending on affixes, so always have a backup plan. If you are a Restoration Druid, you can plant a lot of healing over time effect on whoever has the debuff and just renew them when they're expiring. And by the way, if you are the tank, pay attention on how the healer has decided to deal with this. If they are standing in one place doing a lot of heal, make sure you get heat out of them should Blight Bags bounce on him. The first boss is very simple. Players will need to position themselves correctly to avoid AoE abilities. The first ability is Heaving Wretch. The boss will spew a lot of poison into a cone, targeting someone. That person must isolate himself and up to 3 carrion worms will be summoned. Those must be dealt with quickly. Upon die on Mythic mode, they leave a pool of poison on the ground. If they are not killed fast enough, they get 3 stacks of Blood Gorge and explode into a 30 seconds very heavy dot that will most certainly wipe the party out. That dot can be cleansed though by certain abilities such as the Paladin's Divine Shield. Second is Fetid Gas. Those are pools of poison on the ground, which last up to 2 minutes, dealing damage every 2 seconds and silencing whoever stands on them. Last is Crunch, is a very heavy physical damage on the tank. I'll explain some of the mobs in this dungeon in different parts of the video, for they are very difficult to fight if you don't know their skills, and very easy if you know what to prioritize. The Zoramus Bone Carver. It has an ability called Bone Flay, which will deal high physical damage to the target and apply a debuff, which will deal physical damage over time for 20 seconds and reduce the target's maximum HP by 15%. It must be dispelled. The Zoramus Bone Mender. It has 2 abilities, Bone Mend, which is a healing, and Final Bargain. I will stress some very Matrix level information about this spell. The Final Bargain spell has a 4-second cast time and a 3 seconds cooldown. It will heal a friendly target for 80% of its maximum HP and give it a buff, an aura, which will deal 4% of the caster's maximum HP every 1 second for 20 seconds as damage. The Zoramus Sorcerer. It has 2 very important anti-healer abilities. The Necrotic Bolt, which will inflict heavy damage and absorb the next healing by a heavy amount, and the Shadow Well, which erupts in a player's feet, standing on it deals heavy damage and the player cannot be healed. Skeletal Monstrosity. Easier than it seems. Go away during Reaping Winds. DBM will even tell you to do it. Or you won't be able to dodge Frigid Spikes, which DBM does not warn you about. You can see the mini-boss casting over 1.5 seconds Frigid Spikes, and after he has cast it, every player will see a blue whirl beneath their feet, and the spikes will strike after 2 seconds. Zoramus Necromancer. If you defeat the Necromancer, all Brittle Bone adds will die, so use your most heavy single target abilities on him. It doesn't matter if you engage the third boss while they are on cooldown, the third boss is the easiest in the dungeon. There are many pickable items throughout the dungeon that can be consumed once to aid you. There are 2 weapons, the Bloody Javelin and the Forgotten Forge Hammer. The Javelin will deal physical damage to the target and all enemies it passes through, and a physical damage dot. It also increases the damage they receive by 20% for 16 seconds. This can be used on bosses and combined with heroism for tremendous damage output. The hammer can be consumed to deal severe single target damage and stun the target. In this clip, you'll see what happens when the DPS save these weapons to deal with one of the most dangerous mobs in the dungeon. For this trash warrior mob, you must keep in mind they have a shout ability which will inflict fear on whoever stands inside their purple AoE circle, and every time someone will end up pulling mobs they did not want it to. They have a real pesky cleave attack, so melee DPS have to always position themselves on their back. If you are the tank, you can simply face them away from the party and make sure if you need to move to never, under any circumstance, turn them to your healer if he's nearby, nor to your melee DPS. In High Mythic Plus, they can easily one-shot people. This mob is the hardest part of the dungeon and possibly one of the hardest trash packs in the entire Shadowlands expansion. There are two tips of great value I can offer to handle this. First is some of these mobs, not Narzuda, can be targeted by long CC abilities such as the Paladin's Repentance, the Monk's Paralyze, the Mage's Polymorph, etc. He's accompanied by some mobs which must be defeated before you even try to kill Narzuda, or the fight will be simply impossible. Narzuda himself has some spells that can mostly be evaded, but I'll go through them as if he was a full-fledged boss encounter. Dark Shroud becomes immune to physical damage and deals a small amount of shadow damage to all players every 2 seconds for 12 seconds. Death Burst summons dark orbs that burst after 2 seconds, dealing very heavy shadow damage and silencing. Dodge those no matter what. Grim Fate applies a very heavy shadow damage to a player and all allies within 6 yards for 4 seconds. Necrotic Bolt deals heavy shadow damage and absorbs next healing by a considerate amount. There are 2 methods very efficient to defeat Narzuda. The first is to keep 2 of his minions out of combat via Repentance, Polymorph, Freezing Trap, etc. and defeat them one by one, always interrupting them, so the tank doesn't have to deal with 3 Necrotic Bolts at the same time. The second is by picking the Discharged Animal Orb that lays close to the miniboss and use its ability to keep interrupting Narzuda. Second boss is very easy, it has only one real problem, which is Unholy Frenzy. First ability is Land of the Dead, summons adds that must be focused. The Reanimated Mage is the most dangerous one. It has a Frostbolt, which applies a stackable shield slow, and Frostbolt Volley on Mythic mode, which deals damage to nearby enemies and applied shield as well. His second ability is Final Harvest. It explodes the corpses of the adds. If they were alive, they deal heavy damage to the entire party, but if they were defeated, they deal damage in an 8-yard area around them. In Mythic mode, the boss gains stacks of Tortured Echoes for every add or player killed. It is a small damage, stackable, permanent dot. His third ability, the easiest one, is Necrotic Breath. On top of dealing damage, it reduces healing received by 50%. On Mythic mode, passing through Necrotic Breath applies Necrotic Ichor. It is a 10-second dot which further decreases healing received by 30%. Next is Necrotic Bolt. It deals moderate shadow damage and absorbs the next healing by a slight amount. His last ability is Unholy Frenzy. It increases the boss attack speed by 50% for 16 seconds. The tank will require damage mitigation or heavy healing for this part. The third boss can be pesky. If your party has heroism, you might save it for this boss, especially once he's hooked. The boss fight is separated in 2 stages, one while he's out of the arena and one when he's into the arena. While in the stage 1, there will be Noxious Fog, which is a fog that protects the boss with gigantic dot around him. Don't try to get too close. His second ability and most important one is Awaken Creation. It summons an edge which is crucial to the fight. It has the Meat Hook ability, which must be aimed at the boss to pull it to the arena. This minion also has Mutilate, which deals high physical damage to the tank, and Festering Rot, which is an aura that applies a stackable dot to nearby players. If you are the healer, you will constantly require AoE healing for this fight. Next is Embalming Ichor. It throws a jar that deals damage and leaves poison on the ground. His last ability, Stitch Needle, deals damage and causes a 10-second bleeding. For the stage 2, he will gain Sever Flash, deals considerable physical damage to the tank. Morbid Fixation. The boss ad will fixate on a player for 8 seconds, increasing the damage they do by 100%, but reducing their speed by 60%. If you have a paladin on your team, you can abuse the skill by using Blessing of Protection, which makes them immune to physical damage and harmful effects for 10 seconds, and make use the doubled damage with Heroism to deal tremendous damage to the boss. Last ability is Escape. It returns the boss to the phase 1. If you do not use Heroism on this fight and reduce his HP to less than 50%, probably you only have to fight him twice in the arena. But if you couldn't do so, make sure you save some cooldowns to engage him a third or even a fourth time. Take into account some abilities become available once the boss HP is reduced to a certain threshold, such as Warrior's Execute and Paladin's Blast Hammer. The last boss of this dungeon is Nalthor the Timebinder, which can be very easy if you dodge everything, and very hard, most probably impossible if you can't deal with its mechanics. His first ability is Comet Storm. Icy comets will fall from the sky to deal high damage, increased damage taken by Comet Storm by 25%. All players must keep running during the skill to avoid the comets, and you can even run in circles to avoid luring your comets on someone else. If you are the healer, don't forget to heal the tank while you're dodging. Icebound Aegis. This ability is exclusive to Mythic mode. The boss shields himself for a considerable amount of absorb. While the shield is up, players take moderate damage every 3 seconds and increase damage taken by Icebound Aegis by 10% for 5 seconds. This effect stacks. For this reason, offensive cooldowns are best used upon this ability. Frozen Binds. A random player will be rooted and receive high damage every 2 seconds for 12 seconds. There will be a blue circle of 16 yards around the player. If this effect is dispelled, it will spread to everyone inside the circle. So before dispelling this, make sure no one else is inside the circle. Icy Shard is an ability that deals very high physical damage to the tank. Dark Exile. A random DPS will be banished from the platform and will have 50 seconds to return or die instantly. They'll have to deal with Frigid Cold, Comet Storm, Blizzard and 2 enemies. Frigid Cold. Exclusive to Mythic mode, the player will have his movement speed reduced by 2% every 6 seconds. Once they return to the boss, they will leave a pool of ice that deals damage and slows by 25% for 2 minutes on the boss arena. Its size will depend on how many stacks of Frigid Cold the player had when he returned. For this reason, it's good to save mobility skills to Dark Exile. Blizzard. Rains ice in an area, dealing high damage and slowing by 70% for 5 seconds. Zoramus Siphoner. It has an ability called Enfeeble. This minion will channel a beam dealing small shadow damage every 1 second and reducing haste and movement speed by 50% for up to 5 seconds. Gilded Champion. Has Champion's Boon. After saving the champion, the player will receive 100% increased critical strike chance for 15 seconds. So that was it for today. Thanks for watching. Remember to share this video with your friends. Give me a like if you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments which dungeon do you think I should feature next.